Alright guys, today's episode got a 2019 Ford Escape with a 2.0 motor in it. I'm just going to go briefly over how to do the starter. There's a couple videos about doing it from the bottom, moving the motor, whatnot. Could be a different style starter. Looks like it's for some of the older years. This is going to be for this style. So the bolts actually go towards the motor and trans instead of sideways, if that makes sense. So I just want to show you that real quick just before you proceed with this video so you don't waste any time. So getting into it, first thing you're going to need to do, remove this top engine cover, this piece right here. It's a little bit difficult to do. The front two are super easy to do. That one's pretty easy to do. This one's a little bit more difficult. So I actually had to come from this side. We'll reach back here. You can see this little peg right here. That's where that back one sits on. I actually had to reach up with my little pry tool and get on the manifold back there. So let me see if I can give you guys some light. We'll do this. All right, so I actually had to reach up on this manifold right here and lift up, and I was able to get it to pop. So once you got that cover removed, you can go ahead and disconnect your battery. I didn't disconnect it on the post just because it's a little bit more difficult to get to. I disconnected it right here. That's just a 10 millimeter bolt right there. See, it's this guy right here. So just a 10 mil, comes right off. Make sure to route it against plastic or tape it up or something. Next thing you're going to be doing, removing the air box. So the air box is pretty simple to do. You will need to disconnect this quick connect hose that goes over the air intake tube. That will just make it so you don't break it or anything. Then you have an 8 mil over here. So looking at it from the, as you're looking at it, this would be on the right side. This is the motor. So anyways, this guy goes like this. You're gonna unplug this little connector right here. There's a little quick connect zip tie harness clip you need to pop out. 8 millimeter hose clamp. There's this little guy and this little guy right here. Those are just the push tabs that go into the hole, and then there's one on the back as well. So what I did was I removed these 8 millimeters. There's 4 of them all the way around. You pick this cover off, you pull the air filter out. Probably don't need to do those, but I did it anyways just because I wanted to make sure there was no bolts or anything inside of here. So once you have that guy loosened off, that hose out of the way, that connector unplugged, and the zip tie removed, you can go ahead and give it a good snug pull up. Try not to break anything, but just give it a good snug pull up. This one just popped out for me. I don't believe you need to remove it, but it did pop out for me. It's just a quick plastic connect there. Same thing here, it just slips into the boot. So anyways, so moving on. Next thing you're going to be doing is removing this cover off of the starter. It goes just like this. So there's going to be 2 10 millimeter nuts, one here and one here. There's going to be a plastic zip tie connector, and another one right here. You need to pry those out. And then there's also, let me see here, I don't know how well you can see it. I'm going to try to point to it. This little guy right here, right where my finger's at, is going to be a 10 millimeter nut, and that's a 13 bolt. You don't need to remove the 13 bolt, just a 10 mil nut. And that will allow this guy, this hose, to move around. So if you can see here, if you imagine that little circle right here, that actually slides onto the stud of the starter. That hole behind there is, right there, is where the starter bolt goes through. So you do need to disconnect this black bracket right here because you need to actually slide this off before you can slide this off. So this is sandwiched in between the starter and that little black bracket. So you'll remove the 10, you'll remove that 10 over here, this guy right here, you see here, my finger, zoom that in, there you go. So that 10 and the 10 that'll be on here, and then you'll be able to slide that black bracket a little bit out of the way. Then you can remove this cover. Then you can access the 13 mil and the 13 mil for the starter. So just get real here. So what I did for the bottom one, let me see here. So the top one I used a extension with a swivel and a 13 mil. This guy right here, 13 mil deep socket. I just broke it loose, and then I used my electric impact, if you will, to remove it the rest of the way so I didn't have to sit there and hand thread it. The bottom one I had to use this setup, so the small stubby extension with the deep 13, and then I used this flex head ratchet. I just broke it loose and got as much as I could, and then I spun it out by hand using this, oh yikes, using this for a little extra leverage. I just spun it out with my hand. Once you have all that, you can go ahead and try to work the starter out a little bit. I did go ahead and disconnect this guy right here, the clip off the bottom of the intake, as well as from here, you just popped it out, and then up here as well, right there, popped it out into there. That way it gives me a little bit more flexibility, and I hopefully don't break anything, and it worked perfectly fine. So once you have that kind of moved, that way you can move the starter around, you're gonna lift the starter off of the, sorry guys, lift the starter off of the transmission. It just kind of sucks against it. So this is a transmission, that's how it's mounted in. You'll just kind of pull it off. You might need to wiggle a little bit. Then you're gonna want to, so if you have it like this, you're gonna wanna get the starter crooked as much as you can like that. And then you're gonna remove the 13mm nut and the 10mm nut. You do have to remove both, even though I had unplugged this blue connector right here, the black one with the blue inside, from this guy, thinking I was going to be smart and be able to pull it all out together. But if you can see, that's what that harness looks like. It's built in, so you can't leave that one hooked up to the starter for later. So you need to remove that 13 off the top, the 10 on the bottom, then you can pop this off the starter, and then you can actually just kind of snake the starter out. I had to push the harness all the way back over the starter. I was able to snake the starter out through this hole right here. And yeah, I mean, that's where we're at. Now we're going to be putting it all back together. If you have any questions or comments or anything, feel free to leave them in the video. The total tools needed was a 8mm, a 10mm, a 13, and that was it. So these are those starter bolts, 13 with the 10 nut. So they look like this, if you can imagine. So and then that's all the nuts and bolts needed to remove it. You got 2 starter nut and bolts. You got the 2 10s for that. You got the 110 for the other black bracket. You got the battery cable, and then the 13 and the 10 for the starter signal and battery positive. So, all right, guys, see you in the next one.